Alrighty, welcome back to another thrilling installment of Free Read Fridays. I'm your intrepid narrator, Fraggeth, and today we're going to be reading the final installment of The Lazarus Effect by Frank Herbert and Bill Ransom. A lot is happening all at once. A rocket has been sent up to interact with the hive tanks. Our cast of characters are coming together for a mighty collision against the Green Dashers, and it looks like the kelp wants in its increased agency and capacity for violence and otherwise. And I think Vata is waking up as well. So yeah, a lot's happening. I'm not going to do much preamble here. I'm going to get right down to it. Symbols are worth a damn. Duque Kurtz. 19 Alki 468. Outpost 22. When they call me Mr. Justice, I feel the scales of law and life freeze in my palm. I am not Ward Keel to them, the big-headed man with the long neck and stiff shuffle, but some god who will see the right thing and do it. And good will come. God and good, evil and devil. Words are the symbols that flesh out our world. We expect that. We act on it. Resentment, that's expectation gone bad. I must admit, our crises are legion, but we live to confront our crises, and that's something no god ever promised. Simone Rocksack thinks she knows what Ship has promised. That's her job, she says. She says the faithful what Ship meant. She tells the faithful what Ship meant, and they believe her. The histories are there for the reading. I come to my own conclusions. We are neither rewarded nor punished. We are. My job as Chief Justice has been to keep as many of us being as possible. The committee's foundations were in science and fear. Original questions were quite simple. Kill it or care for it. Terminate if dangerous. That power over life and death in a time of much death lent an aura to the committee that it should never have accepted. In lieu of law, there is the committee. It is true that the CP asserts the law of Ship, and it is also true that her people enforce it. They give unto Ship that which is Ship's. Together we keep the human world flowing. Flow is the right word. We islanders understand current and flow. We understand that conditions and times change. To change, then, is normal. The committee reflects that flexibility. Most law is simply a matter of personal contracts, agreements. Courts deal with squabbles. The committee deals with life and life alone. Somehow that has extended to politics, a matter of group survival. We are autonomous, elect our own replacements, and our word is as close to absolute law as islanders get. They trust nothing fixed. Rigidity in law appalls them as much as cold statuary. Part of our enjoyment of art derives from its transitory nature. It is made constantly new, and if it is to survive over time, it does so in the theatre of memory. We islanders have great respect for the mind. It is a most interesting place, a tool at the base of all tools. Torture chamber, haven of rest, and repository of symbols. All that we have relies on symbol. With symbols we create more world than we were given. We become more than the sum of our parts. Anyone who threatens the mind or its symbolizing endangers the matrix of humanity itself. I have tried to explain as much to Gallo. He has the ears for it. He simply doesn't care. When power shifts, men shift with it. George Orwell, Ship Records. The argument was over whether to arm Nakano. Bushka favored it, and Twisp did not. Ale and Peniel remained aloof, listening but not watching. They stood, each with an arm around the other's waist, looking out on the lowering gray sky visible through the open hatchway. The foil circled on autopilot in a wide pool of open water surrounded by kelp. The outpost lifted from the sea about 10 clicks away, a foam-collared pillar of rock set in a ring of kelp. A kelp-free area surrounded the outpost. The rock appeared to be at least 1 click away from this vantage. Brett found himself alarmed by the change in Bushka. What had the kelp done to Bushka there in the cargo bay? And where were the other captive mermen? Only Ale, Peniel, and Nakano remained of those rescued from the LTA. Twisp voiced it for all of them. What did the kelp do to you, Is? Bushka looked down at the net of weapons by his right foot. His gaze passed over the laser guns he had already distributed to the others, to everyone except Nakano. A look of childlike bewilderment swept over Bushka's face. It told me. It told me. He brightened. It told me we must kill Gallo, and it showed me how. He turned and stared past Ale and Peniel at the kelp drifting on the surging waves. A rapt expression came over his face. And you agree, Nakano? Twisp demanded. It makes little difference, Nakano said, his voice gruff. The kelp wants him dead, but he will not be dead. Twisp shuddered and looked at Scooty and Brett. That's not what it said to me. How about you, kid? It showed me the launching of the rocket. Brett closed his eyes. Scooty pressed herself against him, leaning her head into his shoulder. He knew the experience they had shared. Thousands of people alive now only in the kelp's memories. The last agony of the Guimes Islanders was there, and everything the dead had ever thought or dreamed. He had heard Scooty exclaiming in his mind, Now I know what it feels like to be a mute. Scooty pushed herself a bit away from Brett's embrace and looked at Twisp. The kelp said it's my friend because I'm one of its teachers. What did it say to you, Twisp? Brett asked. Brett opened his eyes wide and stared hard at the long-armed fisherman. Twisp inhaled a deep, quick breath and spoke in a sharp voice. It just told me about myself. It told him he's a man who thinks for himself and likes to keep his thoughts private, Nakano said. It told me we're alike in this. Isn't that it, Twisp? More or less. Twisp sounded embarrassed. It said our kind's dangerous to leaders who demand blind obedience, Nakano said. The kelp respects this. There, you see? Bushka smiled at them, lifting a laser gun out of the pile of weapons he had taken from the people off the LTA. He balanced the lasgun on his open palm, staring at it. Peniel turned from the hatchway and looked at Bushka. "You all accept this?" His voice was flat. He glared at Nakano. "Only you and Kareen and I are left." He jerked his chin toward the hatchway. "Where are the others?" Silence settled over the group. Peniel turned toward the perimeter of kelp visible in the darkening light. He remembered hurdling He remembered hurdling the glut of kelp and reaching for Kareen as a giant vine released her. She had grabbed him close, and they had clung to each other while cries of fear lifted all around them. In that instant of kelp awareness he had been inundated by Kareen, Gallo's captive, sent with Nakano to be used as bait in the capture of Dark Peniel. She had her loyalty problems, too. Her family, with all its power, wanted a hold on Gallo in case he was victorious. But Kareen loathed Gallo. Kareen's fingers had held a painful grip on Peniel's water-frizzed hair while she cried against his neck. Then the kelp had returned and touched them once more. They had both felt the kelp's selective fury, sensed the leaves and vines writhing seaward, bottomward. Presently the hatchway had framed a churning gray sea, not a sign there to betray the fact that humans had been removed from the foil and drowned. But that was the past. Bushka cleared his throat, breaking Peniel's reverie. "They were Gallo's people," Bushka said. "What does it matter?" "Nakano was one of Gallo's people," Twisp said. "It's not an easy choice," Nakano said. "Gallo saved my life once, but so did you, Twisp." So you go with whoever saved you most recently," Twisp said, scorn in his voice. Nakano spoke in a curious lilting tone. "I go with the kelp. There is my immortality." Brett's throat went dry. He'd heard that tone in Guimi's fanatics, the hardest of the hard-core worshippers. Twisp, obviously having a similar reaction, shook his head from side to side. Nakano did not care who he killed. The kelp justified everything. "Gallo wants Vata," Bushka said. "We can't allow that." He passed the lasgun to Nakano, who slipped it into its holster at his thigh. At Bushka's movement, Twisp put his hand on his own weapon. He did not relax even when Nakano displayed empty hands and smiled at him. "7 of us," Twisp said, "and we're supposed to attack a place that could have more than 300 armed people in it." Bushka closed the hatchway before looking at Twisp. "The kelp told me how to kill Gallo," he said. "Do you doubt the kelp?" "You're damn right I do." "But we are going to do it," Bushka said. He pushed past Twisp and went up the passageway toward the pilot cabin. Brett took Scooty's hand and followed. He could hear the others coming after them, Twisp muttering, "Stupid, stupid, stupid." For Brett, Twisp's voice lay immersed in what the kelp had insisted, a chant imprinted on the vocal centers. Certainly this was what the kelp had told Bushka. "Drive Gallo out. Vata will do the rest." The chant surged there, background to a persistent image of Ward Keel imprisoned in Plaz, beckoning to him. Brett felt sure that Keel was Gallo's prisoner at this outpost. Peniel went to the left-hand pilot's seat and checked the instruments. The foil was making minimal headway in the wide circle of open water enclosed by kelp fronds. Brett stopped near the pilot station. Feeling Scooty's hand tremble in his, he squeezed her hand firmly. She leaned against him. He looked out the Plaz to his right. Framed there was a churning gray sea. Rain slanted with a stiff breeze. Kelp fronds lifted and danced on the wave tops, smoothing them and dampening the chop. Even as he looked, darkness settled over the sea. Automatic lighting came on to rim the edges of the cabin's ceiling. Course vector lights winked on the screens in front of Peniel. Twisp had stopped at the entrance to the cabin, his hand on his laser gun, his attention on Nakano. Noting this, Nakano smiled. He moved across in front of Brett and went to the pilot station beside Peniel, activating the exterior lights. A spotlight fanned brilliant illumination across the open water and the edge of kelp. Abruptly, swift motion entered the illuminated area. "Dashes," Peniel said. "Look at that big bull," Nakano said. Brett and Scooty stared out at the scene, the blanket of kelp, the hunt of dashers. "I've never seen such a big one," Ale said. The hunt swept along in an undulating glide behind the monster bull. Nakano tracked them with the spotlight. They circled the dark perimeter of kelp, then worked into the leaves. Nakano turned from the control station and opened the Plaz hatch beside him, letting in a damp rush of wind and rain. Lifting his laser gun, he sent a burning arc at the hunt, tumbling the lead bull and two followers. Their dark green blood washed over the kelp fronds, foaming in the waves. The rest of the hunt turned on its own dead, spreading blood and torn flesh across the fan of light. Abruptly, kelp stalks as thick as a man's waist lifted from the sea, whipped the gore to a foam, and drove the dashers from their feed. Nakano drew back and secured the hatch. "You see that?" he asked. No one answered. They had all seen it. "We will submerge," Bushka said. "We will go in with the foil under water. Nakano will be visible. The rest of us will appear to be captives until the last blink." Brett released Scooty's hand and crossed to confront Bushka. "I'll not have Scooty used as bait." Bushka made a grab for his laser gun, but Brett caught the man's wrist. Young muscles, made powerful by months of hauling nets, flexed once, twisted Bushka's wrist, and the laser gun dropped to the deck. Brett kicked it toward Twisp, who picked it up and hefted it. Bushka eyed the weapons he had left near the passage entrance. "You'd never make it," Twisp said, "so relax." He held the laser gun casually, muzzle pointed downward, but his manner suggested poised readiness. "So what do we do now?" Ale asked. "We could run for the launch base and alert everyone to what's happening," Peniel said. "You'd start a civil war among mermen, and the islanders would be drawn into it," Bushka protested. He rubbed at his wrist where Brett had twisted it. "There's something else," Scooty said. She glanced at Brett, then at Twisp. "Chief Justice Keel is being held prisoner here by Gallo." "In ship's name, how do you know that?" Twisp demanded. "The kelp says it," Scooty said. "It showed me a vision of Keel in captivity." Brett said. "Vision?" Twisp said. "The only important thing is to kill Gallo," Bushka muttered. Twisp looked at Kareen Ale. "The only reason we went back to the cargo bay was to ask you for advice," he said. "What does the ambassador suggest?" "Use the kelp," she said. "Take the foil down to the inner edge of the kelp in sight of the outpost, and we wait. Let them see Scooty and me. That should tempt Gallo to come out. And yes, Justice Keel is there. I've seen him." "I say we run for Vashon," Brett said. "Let me remind you," Ale said, "that the Hybe tanks will be brought down here. The pickup team is at this outpost." "And they're either Gallo's people or Gallo's captives," Twisp sneered. "Any way you look at it, the Hybe tanks are his." Ale glanced at the chrono beside the control panel. "If all goes well, the tanks could be here in a little more than 8 hours." "With 7 of us aboard, we couldn't stay down 8 hours," Peniel said. Bushka began to giggle, startling them. Empty argument, he said. Empty words. The kelp won't permit us to leave until we do its bidding. It's kill Gallo or nothing. Nakano was the first to break the subsequent silence. Then we better get busy, he said. Personally, I like the ambassador's plan, but I think we should also send in a scout party. And you're volunteering? Twisp asked. If you have a better idea, let's hear it, Nakano said. He returned to the cabin's rear bulkhead and opened a supply locker, exposing fins, air tanks, breathers, and dive suits. You saw the kelp crush that sub, Brett reminded Twisp, and you saw what happened with the Dashers. Then I'm the one who goes in, Twisp said. They don't know me. I'll carry our message so they get it real clear. Twisp, no, Brett protested. Yes! Twisp glanced at the others, focusing on each face for a blink. Then, with the exception of the ambassador here, who can't go in for obvious reasons, they want her for ship's sake. But except for her, I'm the obvious one. I'll take Nakano with me. Twisp sent a dasher grin at Nakano, who looked both surprised and pleased. Why you? Brett asked. You could get yourself an eel shit for no good reason. You've never dealt with people who want to get the best of you, kid. You've never had to drive the best bargain you could for fish. You've never had to drive the best bargain you could for your fish. I know how to deal with such people. Gallo is no fish dealer, Bushka said. It's still bargaining for your life and everything you want, Twisp said. The kid stays here with Peniel. They keep an eye on you, Bushka, to see you don't do something crazy. Me, I'm going to tell this Gallo just what he gets. So much and no more. Do that which is good, and no evil shall touch you. Raphael, Apocrypha, the Christian Book of the Dead. Within the first minute of the dive, Twisp tumbled along, flailing his long arms, his fins thrusting inefficiently. He watched helplessly as the gap between himself and Nakano widened. Why was Nakano speeding off that way? Like most islanders, Twisp had trained with merman-style breathers for emergency use. He had even considered at one time that he might permit himself to become one of the rare islanders fitted for an airfish. But airfish were a cash crop, and the operation was outrageously costly. And his arms, superb for net pulling, were not suited to swimming. Twisp struggled to keep Nakano in sight. He skimmed the bottom, his fins puffing sand along a blue-black canyon illuminated by merman lights set into the rock. The sea above him remained a black remoteness hidden in the short night. When Peniel had locked the foil against a rocky outcrop within the outpost's kelp perimeter, he had warned them. The current's ranging between 2 and 4 knots. I don't know where the current came from, but it'll help you get to the outpost. Kelp is making that current, Bushka had said. Whatever is causing it, be careful, Peniel had said. You'll be moving too fast for mistakes. Brett, still protesting the assignment of duties, had demanded, How'll they get back to us? Steal a vehicle, Nakano had said. As he had sealed the dive hatch behind them and prepared to flood the foil's lock, Nakano had said, Stay close, Twisp. We'll be about 10 minutes getting to the outpost hatch. I'll tow you the last few meters. Make it look like you're my prisoner. But now Nakano was far ahead in the chill, green-washed distance. The floppy bubbles of his exhalations raced upward behind him, creating strange prism effects in the artificial light. The merman obviously was in his element here, and Twisp was the Muri out of water. I should have anticipated that, Twisp thought. Abruptly, Nakano rolled to one side in a powerful turn, clutched one of the light mountings anchored in the canyon's wall, and held himself against the current, waiting for Twisp's arrival. Nakano's air tank glistened yellow-green along his back, and his masked face was a grotesque shadow beside the rock. Twisp, somewhat reassured by the merman's action, tried to change course, but would have missed Nakano had not the latter pushed off smoothly and grabbed the breather valve at Twisp's left shoulder. They rowed along together then, swimming gently as the current slackened near the underwater cliff into which the outpost had been planted. Twisp saw a wall of black rock ahead, some of it looking as though it were part of the sea's natural basement complex, some appearing man-changed, great dark shapes piled one atop another. A wide plaz dive lock outlined in the light had been set into this construction. Nakano operated controls at the side of the plaz with one hand. A circular hatch opened before them. They swam into the lock, Nakano still holding Twisp's breather valve. It was an oval space illuminated by brilliant blue lights set into the walls. A plaz hatch on the inner curve revealed an empty passage beyond. The outer hatch sealed automatically behind them, and water began swirling out of the lock through a floor vent. Nakano released his grip on Twisp when their heads emerged from the water. Removing his mouthpiece, Nakano said, "You're being very intelligent for a mute. I could have shut off your air at any time. You'd have been eel bait." Twisp removed his own mouthpiece, but remained silent. Nothing was important except getting to Gallo. "Don't try anything," Nakano warned. "I could break you into small pieces with only one hand." Hoping Nakano was playing a part for any would-be listeners, Twisp looked at the merman's heavily muscled body. Nakano's threat could be real, Twisp thought, but the merman might be surprised at the strength in a net puller's arms, even if those arms did appear to be mutated monstrosities. Nakano took off his tank and harness and held the equipment in his left hand. Twisp waited for the last of the water to swirl through the floor vent, then shucked off his own tank. He held it loosely cradled in one arm, feeling the weight of it and thinking how potent a weapon this would be if hurled suddenly. The inner hatch swung wide, and Twisp tasted hot, moist air. Nakano pushed Twisp ahead of him through the hatchway, and they emerged into a rectangular space with no other visible exit. Abruptly, a voice barked at them from an overhead vent. "Nakano, send the mute topside. If you get off at level 9 and come to me. I want to know why you didn't bring the foil straight in." "Gallo," Nakano explained, looking at Twisp. "After I get off, you go straight on up." Twisp's gut felt suddenly empty. How many people did Gallo have here? Was Gallo so confident of his security that he could release an islander prisoner to wander around without a guard? Or was this a ploy to disarm the stupid islander? Nakano looked up at the vent. Twisp, peering at the ceiling construction, saw the glittering oval of a merman remote eye. "This man's my prisoner," Nakano said. "I presume there are guards topside." "The mute can't run away anywhere up there," Gallo's voice snapped, "but he had better wait near the lift exit. We don't want to hunt all over for him." Twisp felt himself get heavier, and then realized that the entire rectangular room was rising. Presently it stopped, and a thin seam in the back wall opened to reveal a hatch and a well-lighted passageway with many armed mermen in it. Gallo grasped Twisp's dive tanks by the harness. "I'll take them." "I'll take them," he said. "Wouldn't want you using these as a weapon." Twisp released his hold on the equipment. Gallo went out, and the hatch sealed. Again the room lifted. After what seemed to Twisp an interminable wait, the room came again to a stop. The hatch opening was haloed in dim light. Hesitantly, Twisp stepped out into hot, dry air. He looked up and around at high, black cliffs and open sky. Dawn light, still some stars visible. Even as he looked, big sun lifted over the cliffs, illuminating a great rock-girdled bowl with much square-edged merman construction in it, and an LTA base in the middle distance. Open land. Twisp heard someone nearby using a saw. The sound was reassuring, a thing heard often in an island's shop areas, metal and plastics being cut by carpenters for assemblage into necessary non-organic utensils. The rocks were sharp under Twisp's bare feet, and big sun blinded him.
Abimael, simple one, come here out of the sun.
It was a man's voice, and it came from a building ahead of Twisp. He saw someone moving in the shadows. The sound of sawing continued. The air in his lungs felt hot and dry, not the cool metallic dampness of the dive tanks, nor the warm moisture that blew so often across Vashon. The surface underfoot did not move either. Twisp felt this as a dangerous, alien thing. Decks should lift and move. All the edges are hard, he thought. He stepped gingerly forward into the building's shade. The sawing stopped, and now Twisp discerned a figure in the deeper shadows, a dark-skinned man in a diaper-like garment. Long black hair frizzed out from the man's head, and he had a gray-streaked beard. It was one of the few beards Twisp had ever seen, reaching nearly to the man's navel. Twisp had heard that some mermen grew beards and the beard gene cropped up occasionally among islanders, but this luxurious growth was something new. As the man moved in the shadows, Twisp saw the evidence of great physical strength, particularly in the shoulders and upper body. This merman would make a good net puller, Twisp thought. The merman's midsection displayed the preliminary settlings of middle age, however. Twisp guessed the man at a hard-driven 40 or 45, very dark-skinned for a merman. His skin glowed with a layer of red within the leathery tones.
Abimael, come now, the man said. Your feet will burn. Come have a cake till your mamma finds you.
Why does he call me Abimael? Twisp glanced around at the basin enclosed by the high black cliffs. A squad of mermen worked in the middle distance, sweeping the ground with flamethrowers. It was a dreamlike scene in the hot light of swiftly rising big sun. Twisp feared suddenly that he had not been narked. Oh, sorry. Twisp feared suddenly that he had been narked. Peniel had warned him about it. Don't swim off into a deep area, and you be sure to breathe slow and deep, otherwise you could be narked. Nark, Twisp knew, was the merman term for nitrogen narcosis, intoxication they sometimes encountered in the depths when using pressurized air tanks. There were stories, narked divers releasing their tanks at depth and swimming away to drown, or offering their air to a passing fish, or going off into a euphoric water dance.
I hear the flamethrowers,
the old carpenter said. The matter-of-fact confirmation of what Twisp saw eased his fears. No, this is real land, open to the sky. I am here, and I am not knocked.
They think they'll sterilize this land and they'll never have nerve runners here, the carpenter said. The fools are wrong. Nerve runner eggs are in the sea everywhere. Flamethrowers will be needed for as long as people live here.
The carpenter moved across his shadowed area toward a brown cloth folded on a bench. He sat on the end of the bench and opened the cloth, revealing a paper-wrapped package of cakes, dark brown and glossy. Twisp smelled the sweet stickiness rising from the cakes. The carpenter lifted a cake in thick, knuckle-swollen fingers and held it toward Twisp. In that instant, Twisp saw that the man was blind. The eyes were cloud-gray and empty of recognition. Hesitantly, Twisp accepted the cake and sampled it. Rich brown fruit in the cake sweetened his tongue. Again, Twisp looked at the scene in the bowl of open land. He had seen pictures and holos from the histories of He had seen pictures and holos from the histories, but nothing had prepared him for this experience. He felt both attracted and repelled by what he saw. This land would not drift willy-nilly on an uncertain sea. There was a sense of absolute assurance in the firmness underfoot. But there was a loss of freedom in it, too. It was locked down and enclosed, limited. Too much of this could narrow a man's vision.
One more cake, Abimael, and then you go home, the carpenter said.
Twisp stepped back from the carpenter, hoping to escape silently, but his heel encountered a stone and he tumbled backward, sitting sharply on another stone. An involuntary cry of pain escaped him.
Now, don't you cry, Abimael,
The carpenter said. Twisp heaved himself to his feet. I'm not Abimael, he said. The carpenter aimed his sightless eyes toward Twisp and sat silent for a moment. Then,
I hear that now. I hope you liked the cake. You see Abimael anywhere around?
no one inside but the men with the flamethrowers.
Damned fools.
The carpenter swallowed a cake whole and licked the syrupy coating off his fingers.
They're bringing islanders onto the land already?
I I think I'm the first.
They call me Noah, the carpenter said. You can take it as a joke. Say I was the first one out here. Are you badly deformed, islander?
Twisp swallowed a sudden rise of anger at the man's bluntness. My arms are rather long, but they're perfect for pulling nets.
Don't mind the useful variations, Noah said. What's your name?
Twisp. Queets Twisp.
Twisp, Noah said. I like that name. It has a good sound. Want another cake?
No, thank you. It was good, though. I just can't take too much sweetness. What are you making here?
I'm working with a bit of wood, Noah said. Think of that! Wood grown on Pandora. I'm fashioning some pieces that will be made into furniture for the new director of this place. You met him yet? Name's Gallo.
I haven't had that pleasure, Twisp said.
You will. He sees everybody. Doesn't like mutes, though, I'm afraid.
How were you? I mean, your eyes.
I wasn't born this way. It was caused by staring at a sun too long. Bet you didn't know that, did you? If you stand on solid ground so you don't move around, you can stare right at the sun. But it can blind you.
Oh. Twisp didn't know what else to say. Noah seemed resigned to his fate, though.
Abimael!
Noah raised his voice into a loud call. There was no answer.
He'll come, Noah said. Save the cake for him. He knows it.
Twisp nodded, then felt the foolishness of the gesture. He stared across the enclosed basin. The land glared at him from all sides, everything highlighted by the brightness of big sun. The buildings were stark white, shot through with streaks of brown. Water, or the illusion of water, shimmered in a flat area near the far cliffs. The flamethrowers had been silenced, and the merman workers had gone into a building toward the center of the basin. Noah returned to his woodworking. There was no wind, no sound of seabirds, no sound of Abimael, who was supposed to be coming to his father's call. Nothing. Twisp had never before heard such silence, not even under water.
They call me Noah, Noah said. Go to the records and look up the histories. I call my firstborn Abimael. Do you dream strange things, Twisp? I used to dream about a big boat called an ark in the time when the original Terra home was flooded. The ark saved lots of humans and animals from the flood. Kinda like the hype tanks in that, you know.
Twisp found himself fascinated by the carpenter's voice. The man was a storyteller and knew the trick of flexing his voice to hold a listener's attention.
The ones who didn't get on the ark, they all died, Noah said. When the sea went down, they found the stinking carcasses for months. The ark was built so animals and people couldn't climb aboard unless they were invited and the ramp was lowered.
Noah mopped sweat from his brow with a purple cloth.
Stinking carcasses everywhere, he muttered.
A slight breeze came over the cliff walls and wafted the heavy stink of burned things across Twisp. He could almost smell the rotting flesh Noah described. The carpenter hefted two joined pieces of wood and hung them on a peg in the wall behind him.
Ship made a promise that Noah would live,
Noah said.
But watching that much death was very bad. When so many die and so few live, think how dead the survivors must feel. They needed the miracle of Lazarus, and it was denied them.
Noah turned away from the wall, and his blind eyes glittered in the reflected light. Twisp saw that tears rolled unchecked down the man's cheeks and onto his dark, bare chest.
I don't know whether you'll believe it, Noah said, but Ship has talked to me.
Twisp stared at the tear-stained face, fascinated. For the first time in his life, Twisp felt himself to be in the presence of an authentic mystery.
Ship spoke to me, Noah said. I smelled the stink of death and saw bones on the land still clotted with rotting flesh. Ship said, I will not again curse the ground for mankind's sake.
Twisp shuddered. Noah's words came with a compelling force that could not be rejected. Noah paused, then went on.
And Ship said, the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth. What do you think of that?
For mankind's sake, Twisp thought. Noah frightened him then by speaking it once more aloud.
For mankind's sake, as though we begged for it, as though we couldn't work out something better than all that death.
Twisp began to feel a deep sympathy for the carpenter. This Noah was a philosopher and a profound thinker. For the first time, Twisp began to feel that Islander and merman might achieve a common understanding. All mermen were not gallows or Nakanos.
You know what, Twisp? Noah asked. I expected better of Ship than slaughter. And to say he does it for mankind's sake.
Noah came across the shadowed work area, skirting the bench as though he could see it, and stopped directly in front of Twisp.
I hear you breathing there, Noah said. Ship spoke to me, Twisp. I don't care whether you believe that. It happened.
Noah reached out and grasped Twisp's shoulder, moved the hand downward, and explored the length of Twisp's arm, then returned to trace a finger over Twisp's face.
Your arm is long, Noah said. Don't see anything wrong in it, if it's useful. You got a good face. Lots of wrinkles. You live outside a lot. You see any sign of my Abimael yet?
Twisp swallowed.
No. Don't you be frightened of me just because I talk to Ship, Noah said. This new ark of ours is out on dry land once and for all. We're going to leave the sea.
Noah pulled away from Twisp and returned to the workbench. A hand touched Twisp's right arm. Startled, he whirled and confronted Nakano. The big merman approached without a sound. The big merman had approached without a sound.
Gonna wants to see you now, Nakano said. Where is that Abimael?
Noah asked. And the dove came into him in the evening, and lo, in her mouth was an olive leaf plucked off. Genesis 8:11, the Christian Book of the Dead. Duque ignored the gasps of the watchers ringed around the constant gloom of the Vata pool. His ears did not register the strangled moan that came clearly from the wide, flaccid throat of the CP. The heavy fist that Vata clamped to his genitals captured Duque's attention completely. Her fervor hurled him painfully out of pseudo-sleep, but her touch softened with every blink. The poolside gasps were replaced by sporadic mutterings and a few hushed giggles. When Duque's hand began its complimentary stroking of Vata's huge body, the room stilled. Vata moaned. The poolside watchers were soaked by the waves set up under the rhythmic strokes of her mighty hips.
They're going to pair. Her eyes are open, one said. And look, they move.
Vata licked her lips, pinned Duque to the bottom of the pool, and straddled him there. Her head and the tops of her shoulders broke the surface, and she gasped great, long breaths with her head thrown back.
Yes,
Vata said, and the CP's mind registered.
Her first word in almost 300 years.
How could the circumstances of that first word be explained to the faithful?
It's to punish me.
The thought flooded Simone Roxack's mind.
She saw it all.
The CP wondered, then, what sort of punishment Vata might have in mind for Gallo. It was then the CP noted that the sloshing from the Vata pool was not all resulting from the activity inside. The decks themselves heaved in the same slow rhythm.
What's happening?
The CP caught herself muttering the question and glanced around to see that she had not been overheard. A series of tight-throated moans from Vata, then another explosive, breathless "Yes!" Duque was nearly undetectable under her rippling flanks and ham-like hands. The CP's eyes widened in horror and humiliation as she realized that Vata's performance with Duque was a grotesque parody of her last hours with Gallo. Her position wouldn't even allow her to leave the room, to escape the heat that crept outward from the collar of her blue robe to burn her cheeks and her breasts. A trace of sweat graced her upper lip and temples. Someone burst into the room and shouted,
The kelp!
The voice strained to reach over the babblings of a crowd that was well into a serious hysteria.
The kelp's rocking the island! It's rocking the whole fucking sea!
The little stump-legged messenger clapped a fingerless hand over his mouth when he caught sight of the CP. There were three sudden cries that brought a chill to the CP's spine. Vata's thighs shuddered in their grip on Duque, and Vata fell back into the pool, wide-eyed and smiling, still anchored to him by their short but stout tether. The heavy rocking of the decks slackened. The crowd at poolside had stilled with the outburst from Vata. The CP knew better than to lose this moment. She swallowed hard, lifted her robe to clear her ankles, and knelt at the rim of the quieting pool.
Let us pray,
she said, and bowed her head.
think,
She thought to herself.
think.
Her eyes squinted shut against fear, reality, and those difficult traitors, tears.
Physically, we are created by our reverie, created and limited by our reverie, for it is the reverie which delineates the furthest limits of our minds.
Gaston Bachelard, The Poetics of Reverie, from the Handbook of the Chaplain Psychiatrist. On the way down to confront Gallo, Twisp ignored the spying devices in the ceiling and spoke openly to Nakano. Twisp no longer doubted that Nakano was playing a devious double game. What did it matter? Meeting the carpenter, Noah had heartened Twisp. Gallo would have to accept the new realities of Pandora. The kelp wanted him dead, and would have him dead. The open land belonged to everyone. Gallo could only delay the inevitable. He could not prevent it. He was a prisoner here. All of his people were prisoners here. Nakano only laughed when Twisp spoke of this.
He knows he's a prisoner. He knows Kareen and Scooty are out there, one step out of reach.
He'll never get them, Twisp said.
Maybe not, but he has the Chief Justice. A bargain may be possible.
It's strange, Twisp said. Before I met that carpenter up there, I didn't really know what I was bargaining for.
What carpenter? What carpenter?
The man I was talking to topside. Noah. Didn't you hear him talking about the Ark and ship speaking to him?
There was no man up there. You were alone.
He was right there. How could you have missed him? Long beard down to here. Twisp passed a hand across his belt line. He was calling for a child. Abimael.
You must have been hallucinating, Nakano said, his voice mild. You were probably knocked by the dive.
He gave me a cake, Twisp whispered. Remembering the fruity flavor of the cake, the sticky feeling of it on his fingers, Twisp lifted his right hand to the level of his eyes and rubbed his fingers together. There was no stickiness. He smelled the fingers. No smell of cake. He touched his tongue to his fingers. No taste of the cake. Twisp began to tremble.
Hey, take it easy, Nakano soothed. Anyone can be knocked.
I saw him, Twisp whispered. We spoke together. Ship made him a promise. I will not again curse the ground for mankind's sake.
Nakano took a backward step away from Twisp.
You're crazy. You were standing out in the sun all alone.
No workshop? Twisp asked, his voice plaintive. No bearded man in the shadows?
There were no shadows. You probably had a touch of the sun. No hat. Big sun beating down on you. Forget it.
I can't forget it. I felt him touch me, his finger on my face. He was blind.
Well, put it behind you. We're about to see Galar Gallo, and if you're going to bargain with him, you'll need your wits about you.
The moving cubicle came to a stop, and the hatch opened onto a passage. Nakano and Twisp emerged and were flanked immediately by 6 armed mermen.
This way, Nakano said. Gallo is waiting for you.
Twisp took a deep, trembling breath and allowed himself to be escorted along the merman corridor with its sharp corners and hard sides, its unmoving, solid deck.
That Noah was really there,
Twisp told himself. The experience had contained too much sense of reality.
The kelp.
He tingled out to the tips of his fingers with realization. Somehow the kelp had insinuated itself into his mind, taken dominion over his senses. The realization terrified him, and his step faltered.
"There, keep up, mute!"
One of the escort barked.
"Easy does it," Nakano cautioned the guard. "He's not used to a deck that doesn't move."
Twisp was surprised by the friendliness in Nakano's voice, his sharpness with the escort.
Does Nakano really sympathize with me?
They stopped at a wide rectangular hatchway open to the passage. I misread that. No, I said that right. They stopped at a wide rectangular hatchway open to the passage. The room exposed beyond it was large by Islander standards, at least 6 meters deep and about 10 or 11 meters wide. Gallo sat before a bank of display screens near the back wall. He turned as Twisp and Nakano entered, leaving the escort in the passage. Twisp was immediately struck by the even regularity of Gallo's features, the silkiness of that long, golden mane, which reached almost to the merman's shoulders. The cold blue eyes studied Twisp carefully, pausing only briefly on Twisp's long arms. Gallo came to his feet easily as Nakano and Twisp stopped about 2 paces from him. "Welcome," Gallo said. "Please do not consider yourself our prisoner. I look upon you as a negotiator for the islanders." Twisp scowled. So Nakano had revealed everything. "Not you alone, of course," Gallo added. "We will be joined presently by Chief Justice Keel." Gallo's voice was softly persuasive. He smiled warmly. "A charmer," Twisp thought. "Doubly dangerous." Gallo studied Twisp's face a blink, those cold blue eyes peeling the islander. "I'm told," he glanced at Nakano, standing near Twisp's left shoulder, then back to Twisp, "that you do not trust the kelp." Nakano pursed his lips when Twisp glanced at him.
"It's true, isn't it?"
Nakano asked. "It's true." The admission was wrenched from Twisp. "I think we have created a monster in bringing the kelp to consciousness," Gallo said. "Let me tell you that I have never believed in that part of the kelp project. It was demeaning, immoral, treachery against everything human." Gallo waved his hand, the gesture saying clearly that he had explained himself sufficiently. He turned to Nakano. "Will you ask the guard out there if the Chief Justice has recovered enough to be brought in here?" Nakano turned on one heel and went out into the passage where a low-voiced conversation could be heard. Gallo smiled at Twisp. Presently Nakano returned. "What's wrong with Keel?" Twisp demanded. "Recovered from what?" And he wondered. torture? Twisp did not like Gallo's smile. The Chief Justice, as I prefer to call him, has a digestion problem. A scuffling sound at the entrance to the room brought Twisp's attention around. He stared hard as two of the escort brought Chief Justice Ward Keel into the room, supporting him as he shuffled stiffly along. Twisp was shocked. Keel looked near death. Where his skin was visible, it was pale and moist. There was a glazed look in his eyes, and they did not track together, one peering back toward the passage, the other looking down where he placed each painful step. Keel's neck, supported by that familiar prosthetic framework, still appeared unable to support the man's large head. Nakano brought a low chair from the side and placed it carefully behind Keel. The escort eased Keel gently into the chair, where he sat a moment, panting. The escort departed. "I'm sorry, Justice Keel," Gallo said, his voice full of practiced commiseration, "but we really must use what time we have. There are things that I require." Keel raised his attention slowly, painfully, to look up at Gallo.
"And what Gallo wants, Gallo gets,"
Keel said. His voice came out faint and trembling.
"They say you have a digestion problem,"
Twisp said, looking down at the familiar figure of the islander who had served so long as a center of topside life. One of Keel's oddly placed eyes moved to take in Twisp, noting the long arms, the islander stigmata. Twisp's islander accent could not be denied.
"You are?"
Keel asked, his voice a bit stronger.
"I'm from Vashon, sir. My name's Twisp, Queets Twisp." "Oh, yes, fisherman. Why are you here?"
Twisp swallowed. Keel's skin looked like pale sausage casing. The man obviously needed help, not this demanding confrontation with Gallo. Twisp ignored Keel's question and turned on Gallo.
"He should be in a hospital."
A faint smile tugged at Gallo's mouth. "The Chief Justice has refused medical help."
"Too late for that," Keel said. "What's the purpose of this meeting, Gallo?"
"As you know," Gallo said, "Vashon is grounded near one of our barriers. They have survived a storm, but took severe damage. For us, they are now a sitting target."
"But you're trapped here,"
Twisp said. "Indeed," Gallo agreed. "But then not all of my people are with me. Others are placed strategically throughout Merman and Islander society. They still do my bidding." "Islanders work for you?" Twisp demanded. "The CP among them." Again that faint smile touched Gallo's mouth.
"That's remarkable after what he did to Gwimmis,"
Keel said. He spoke almost normally, but the effort of sitting upright and carrying it off was apparent. Perspiration dotted his wide forehead. Gallo pointed a finger at Twisp, eyes glittering. "You have Kareen Ale, fisherman Twisp. Vashon has Vata. I will have both."
"Interesting,"
Keel said. He looked at Twisp.
"You really have Kareen?"
"She's out there in our foil, just within the kelp line where Gallo and his people can't go." "I think Nakano could go there," Gallo said. "Nakano?"
"Perhaps,"
Nakano said. "The kelp passed him unmolested coming in here," Gallo said, smiling at Twisp. "Doesn't it appear likely that Nakano has immunity from the kelp?" Twisp looked at Nakano, who once more stood passively at one side, obviously listening, but not focusing his eyes on any of the speakers. It came to Twisp then that Nakano did indeed belong to the kelp. The big merman had made some kind of pact with the monster presence in the sea. To Twisp, Nakano appeared the embodiment of merman killer viciousness, all of it concealed within a warmly reasonable mask. Was that Nakano's value to the kelp? There could be no missing the fanatic's tone when Nakano spoke of the kelp.
"The kelp is my immortality."
That was what Nakano had said. Really, there should be no need for violence and killing. Gallo said. "We are all reasonable men. You have things you want. I have things I want. Surely there must be some common ground where we can meet." Twisp's thoughts darted back to that odd topside encounter with the carpenter, Noah. If that was really the kelp projecting hallucination into his mind, what was the purpose? What was the message? Slaughter was wrong. Even if Ship commanded it, slaughter was wrong. Twisp had felt this strongly in Noah's manner and words. The ark has grounded, and the land no longer will be cursed by Ship. Twisp knew vaguely of the ark legend. Was there a message from Ship here, sent through the kelp? Gallo, on the other hand, represented treachery, a man who would do anything to gain his ends. Did the CP really work for him? If so, an evil pact had been forged. And what if Noah was just hallucination? Nakano could be right. I might have been narked. Nakano focused abruptly on Twisp and asked, "Why aren't you nauseated?" It was such a startling question, suggesting Nakano had read Twisp's mind, that Twisp was a moment focusing on the possible implications.
"Are you also sick?"
Keel asked, peering up at Twisp.
"I'm quite well,"
Twisp said. He tore his gaze away from Nakano and looked more closely at Gallo, seeing the marks of self-indulgence in the man's face, the sly twist of the smile, the frown lines in the forehead, the down-turned creases at the corners of his mouth. Twisp returned then to the knowledge of what he had to do. Speaking slowly and distinctly, directing his words at Gallo, Twisp said, "The imagination of your heart has been evil from your youth." Ship's words, as reported by Noah, came easily from Twisp's mouth, and once he had said them, he felt their rightness. Gallo scowled. Then, "You're not much of a diplomat."
"I'm a simple fisherman,"
Twisp said.
"Fisherman, but not simple,"
Keel said. A chuckle turned into a weak, dry cough.
"You think Nakano has immunity from the kelp,"
Twisp said.
"I was his passport. Without me he would have joined the others. He has told you about the others, that the kelp drowned, hasn't he?"
"I tell you the kelp is out of control," Gallo said. "We have loosed a monster on Pandora. Our ancestors were right to kill it off."
"Perhaps they were," Twisp agreed, "but we'll not be able to do it again."
"Poisons and burners," Gallo said.
"No!"
The word was torn from Nakano. He glared at Gallo. "We will only prune it back to manageable size," Gallo said, his voice soothing. "Too small a number to be conscious, but large enough to preserve our dead forever." Nakano nodded curtly, but did not relax.
"Tell him, Nakano," Twisp ordered. "Could you really return to the foil without me?"
"Even if the kelp passed me, the crew probably wouldn't let me aboard,"
Nakano said.
"I don't see how you're going to sink Vashon when it's already aground,"
Keel said. A painful smile curved the edges of Keel's mouth. "So you think I'm helpless," Gallo said. Twisp glanced back at the open hatchway into the passage. The guards clustered there, trying to make it appear that they were not listening.
"Don't your people know how you've trapped them?"
Twisp demanded, his voice loud and carrying.
"As long as you live, they're prisoners here."
Blood suffused Gallo's face.
"But Vashon is in a perimeter of kelp that you can't penetrate," Twisp said. "Nobody you send against Vashon can get through."
He looked at Keel.
"Mr. Justice, isn't that—"
"No, no," Keel husked. "Go on. You're doing fine." Gallo made a visible attempt to control his anger, taking several deep breaths, squaring his shoulders. He said, "LTAs can—"
"LTAs are limited in what they can do," Nakano interrupted. "You know what happened to the one I was on. They are vulnerable."
Gallo looked at Nakano as though seeing the man for the first time. Do I hear my faithful Nakano correctly?
Don't you understand? Nakano asked, his voice softly penetrating. It doesn't matter what happens to us. Come, I will go into the kelp with you. Let it take us.
Gallo backed 2 steps away from Nakano.
Come, Nakano insisted. The Chief Justice obviously is dying. The 3 of us will go together. We will not die. We will live forever in the kelp.
You fool! Gallo snapped. The kelp can die. It was killed once, and that could happen again.
The kelp does not agree, Nakano said. Vata lives forever.
His voice lifted on the last sentence, and a wild light came into his eyes. Nakano, Nakano, my most trusted companion, Gallo said, his voice pitched to its most persuasive tone, let us not permit the heat of the moment to sway us. Gallo sent an apprehensive glance toward the listening guards at the hatchway. Of course the kelp can live forever, but not in such numbers that it threatens our existence. Nakano's expression did not change. Keel, watching the scene through pain-glazed eyes, thought, Nakano knows him. Nakano does not trust him. Twisp entertained a similar thought and knew he had found the ultimate leverage to use against Gallo. Nakano can be turned against his chief. Gallo constructed a rueful smile, which he turned toward Keel. Mr. Justice Keel, let us not forget that the CP is still mine, and I will have the Hybe tanks. That's his best shot, Keel thought. I'll bet the CP doesn't know it was you who sank Guimis. Keel managed. Can anyone carry such an accusation to her? Gallo asked. He looked blandly around him.
Is that our death warrant? Twisp wondered. Will we be silenced permanently?
He decided on a bold attack. If we do not return to the foil, they will broadcast that accusation and Bushka's statement confirming it. Bushka? Gallo's eyes showed both shock and glee. Do you mean Bushka, the islander who stole our sub? Gallo smiled at Nakano. Do you hear that? They know where to find the sub-thief. Nakano did not change expression. Gallo glanced at the chrono beside his communications terminal. Well, well, it's almost time for the midday meal. Fisherman Twisp, why don't you stay here with the Chief Justice? I'll have food sent in. Nakano and I will dine together and consult on possible compromises. You and the Chief Justice can do the same. Gallo moved to Nakano's side. Come, old friend, Gallo said. I didn't save your life to provide myself with an opponent. Nakano glanced at Twisp, the thought plain on the big face.
Why did you save my life?
Twisp chose to answer the unspoken question. You know why. And he thought, I saved you simply because you were in danger. Nakano already knew this. Nakano resisted the pressure on his arm. Do not quarrel with me, old friend, Gallo said. Both of us will go to the kelp in time, but it's too soon. There's much yet for us to do. Slowly, Nakano allowed himself to be guided from the room, his muscles trembling so hard that his great head shook with visible tremors. Keel lifted his attention to Twisp. We do not have much time, Keel said. Clear that table at the end of the room and help me to stretch out on it. Moving quickly, Twisp swept the objects off the table, then returned to Keel. Slipping his long arms under the chairman, Twisp lifted the old body, shocked at how light the man was. Keel was nothing but thin bones in a loose sack of skin. Gently, Twisp carried the chairman across the room and eased him onto the table. Weakly, Keel fumbled with the harness of his prosthesis. Help me get this damned thing off, he gasped. Twisp unbuckled the harness and slipped the prosthesis away from Keel's back and shoulders, letting it drop to the floor. Keel sighed with relief.
I prefer to leave this world more or less as I came into it, he grated, every word draining him. No, don't object. Both of us know that I'm dying. Sir, is there anything I can do to help you? You've already done it. I was afraid I'd have to die in the midst of strangers. Surely we can do something to... Really, there's nothing. The best doctors on Vashon have conveyed to me the verdict of that higher committee on vital forms. No, you are the perfect person for this moment. Not so close to me that you'll become maudlin, yet close enough that I know you care. Sir, anything I can do, anything. Use your own superb good sense in dealing with Gallo. You've already seen that Nakano can be turned against him. Yes, I saw that. There is one thing. Anything. Don't let them give me to the kelp. I don't want that. Life should have a body of its own, even such a poor body as this one I'm about to leave. I'll... Twisp broke off. Honesty forced him to remain silent. What could he do? Keel sensed this confusion. You will do what you can, he said. I know that. And if you fail, I am not your judge. Tears filled Twisp's eyes. Anything I can do, I'll do. Don't be too hard on the CP, Keel whispered. What? Twisp bent close to the chairman's lips. Keel repeated it, adding, Simone is sensitive and bitter. Simone is a sensitive and bitter woman, and you've seen Gallo. Imagine how attractive he would seem to her. I understand, Twisp said. I'm filled with joy that the islands can produce such good men, Keel said. I am ready to be judged. Twisp wiped at his eyes, still bending close to hear the chairman's last words. When Keel did not continue, Twisp became aware that there was no sound of breathing from the supine figure. Twisp put a hand to the artery at Keel's neck. No pulse. He straightened. What can I do? Was there anything combustible here to burn the old body and prevent the merman from consigning Keel to the sea? He looked all around the room. Nothing. Twisp stared helplessly at the body on the table. Is he dead? It was Nakano speaking from the hatchway. Twisp turned to find the big merman standing just inside the room. The tears on Twisp's face were sufficient answer. He's not to be given to the kelp, Twisp said. Friend Twisp, he died, but he need not be dead, Nakano said. You can meet him again in a Vata. Twisp clenched his fists, his long arms trembling. No! He asked me to prevent that! But it's not up to us, Nakano said. If he was a deserving man, Vata will wish to accept him. Twisp jumped to the side of the table and stood with his back to it. Let me take him to Vata, Nakano said. He moved toward Twisp. As Nakano came within range of those long arms, Twisp shot out a net calloused fist, leaning his shoulder behind it. The blow struck with a blinding speed on the side of Nakano's jaw. Nakano's heavily muscled neck absorbed most of the shock, but his eyes glazed. Before he could recover, Twisp leaped forward and wrenched one of Nakano's arms backward, intending to throw the man to the deck. Nakano recovered enough to tense his muscles and prevent this. He turned slowly against Twisp's pressure, moving like a great pillar of kelp. Abruptly, the guards swarmed into the room. Other hands grabbed Twisp and jerked him aside, pinning him to the deck. Don't hurt him, Nakano shouted. The pressures on Twisp eased, but did not leave. Nakano stood over Twisp, a sad look on the big face, a touch of blood at the corner of his mouth. Please, friend Twisp, I mean you no harm. I mean only to honour the Chief Justice and Chairman of the Committee on Vital Forms, a man who has served us so well for so long. One of the guards pinning Twisp down snickered. Immediately, Nakano grasped the man by a shoulder and lifted him like a sack of fish meal, hurling him aside. These islanders you sneer at are as dear to Vata as any of us, Nakano bellowed. Any among you who forgets this will answer to me. The abused guard stood with his back to a bulkhead, his face contorted with fear. Indicating Twisp with one thick finger, Nakano said, Hold him, but let him up. Nakano went to the table and lifted Keel's body gently in his arms. He turned and strode past the guards, pausing at the hatchway. When I have gone, take the fisherman to our leader. Gilar Gallo is topside and has things to say. Nakano looked thoughtfully at Twisp. He needs your help to get the hive tanks. They're on their way down. Hibernation, with a Y, is to hibernation, with an I, as death is to sleep. Closer to death than it is to life, hibernation can be lifted only by the grace of ship. The Histories. While Brett held Bushka down, Ale tied off the stump of Bushka's left arm with a length of dive harness. Bushka lay just inside the main hatch, the sea surface visible through the Plaz port behind him. Big sun, just entering its afternoon quadrant, painted oily cowls across the kelp fronds out there, now bright and now dulled as clouds scudded overhead. A moan escaped Bushka. The foil rolled gently in a low sea. Ale braced herself against a bulkhead while she worked. There, she said as she tied off the dive harness. Blood smeared the deck around them, and their dive suits were red with it. Ale turned and shouted up the passage behind Brett. Shadow, do you have that cot ready? I'm bringing it. Brett took a deep breath and looked out the Plaz at the quiescent kelp. So harmless looking, so tranquil. The horizon was an absurd pinkish gray where little sun would soon lift into view, joining its giant companion. It had been a hellish half hour. Bushka, meandering aimlessly around the pilot cabin, had lulled them into a sense of security by his casual movements. Abruptly, he had dashed down the passageway and hit the manual override on the main hatch. Water had come blasting in at the high pressure of their depth, almost 35 meters down. Bushka had been prepared. Standing to one side of the blasting water, he had grabbed an emergency tank breather outfit stored beside the hatch, slipping swiftly into the harness. Brett and Peniel, running after him, had been spilled and tumbled in the wash of water boiling down the passage. Only Scooty's alertness in sealing off a section between them and the open hatch had saved the foil and its occupants. Bushka had kicked easily out into the kelp jungle where the foil lay on bottom. Scooty, faced with tons of water in the foil, had blown tanks and started the pumps, shouting for Kareen to help Brett and Shadow. The foil had lifted slowly, floating upward through the massed kelp. Brett and Peniel, splashing their way back into the cabin, had accepted a hand from Kareen. Scooty, seated at the controls, spared a glance for Brett to reassure herself that he was safe, then returned her attention to the watery world visible through the Plaz. It's tearing him apart, Scooty gasped. The others sloshed to a position behind Scooty and looked outside. The foil slithered upward against giant kelp fronds, giving those inside the pilot cabin a dimly lighted view of Bushka close beside them. One large kelp tentacle, wrapped around his body, held Bushka fast while another tentacle gripped his left arm. A cloud of dark liquid flooded the water around Bushka's arm. Kareen gasped. Brett understood then. The cloud. Blood. The arm had been torn from Bushka's body. As though it wanted to spit him out, the kelp tentacles whipped away from Bushka and shunted him swiftly upward. Scooty tipped the foil's nose up and drove for the surface. They found Bushka there, half conscious and bleeding dangerously. A hunt of dashers, coming to the smell of blood, was whipped back by kelp fronds. Later, after Kareen had treated Bushka, Brett and Peniel lashed him to the cot and carried him forward. Ale walked alongside. "He's lost a lot of blood," she said. "The brachial artery was wide open." Scooty remained at the helm, sparing only a brief glance at Bushka's pale face as the cot was lowered to the deck behind her. She held the foil in a tight circle within a kelp-free area. Choppy waves drummed a dulled tunk-tunk against the hull. The last of the unwanted water had gone overboard, but the decks were still damp with it. Scooty, the image of Bushka's injuries fresh in her mind, thought, "Ship save us! The kelp has turned vicious!" Peniel stood above Bushka. A wash of agony grayed Bushka's face, but he appeared conscious. Seeing this, Peniel demanded, "What were you trying to do?" "Shh," Ale cautioned. "It's all right. It's all right," Bushka managed. "Was gonna kill Gallo." Peniel could not suppress his outrage.
You almost killed us all! You almost killed us all!
Kareen pulled Peniel away. Brett slid into the seat beside Scooty and looked out at the dark pile of the outpost with its foam-laced base. Little sun had risen, and the water was bright with the double light. "Kelp," Bushka said. "Hush," Ale said. "Save your strength." "Gotta talk. Kelp has all the Gwimmis dead in it. All there. Said I tore off arm of humanity. Punished me in kind. Damn! Damn!" He tried to look at the place where his arm had been, but the lashings on the cot restrained him. Scooty stared wide-eyed at Brett. Was it possible the kelp took on the personality of all the dead it had absorbed? Would all the old scores be settled? Given consciousness finally, and words with which to express itself, the kelp spoke in violent action. She shuddered as she looked out at the green fronds surrounding the foil. "There are dashes all over the place," Scooty said. "Where's my arm?" Bushka moaned. His eyes were closed, and his large head looked even larger against the pale fabric of the cot. "Packed in ice in the cooler," Ale said. "We'll interfere as little as possible with the wound tissue. Better chance for reattachment." Kelp knew I was just a fool that Gallo took advantage of," Bushka groaned. He twisted his head from side to side. "Why'd it hurt me?" A heavy gust of wind popped the foil hard and thrust it sideways against the kelp. A loud thump sounded amidships, and the foil heeled, righting itself with a rasping hiss. "What is it? What's that?" Ale demanded. Brett pointed to the sky above the outpost. "I think we've had our attention called to something. I think we've just had our attention called to something. Look! Have you ever seen that many LTAs?"
LTA's hell, Peniel said. Ship's guts. Those are highlighters. Thousands of them.
Brett stared, open-mouthed. Like all Pandoran children, he had watched hollows of the kelp's spore carriers, a phenomenon unseen on Pandora for generations. Peniel was right. Highlighters. They're so beautiful, Scooty muttered. Murmured, sorry. They're so beautiful, Scooty murmured. Brett had to agree. The highlighters, giant organic hydrogen bags, danced with rainbow colors in the doubled sunlight. They drifted high across the outpost, moving southwest on a steady wind.
It's out of our hands now, Peniel said. The kelp will do its own propagating.
They're coming down, Brett said. Look, some of them are trailing tentacles in the water. The flight of highlighters, well past the outpost now, moved in a gentle slope of wind toward the sea. "It's almost as though they were being directed," Scooty said. See how they move together. Once more, something hard banged against the foil's hull. A channel opened beside them, spreading outward toward the place where the highlighters were coming down close above the water. Slowly at first, a current moved the foil into the new channel.
Better go along with it,
Peniel said. But Twisp is still there at the outpost, Brett objected.
Kelp's directing this show, Peniel said. Your friend will have to take his own chances. Chances.
I think Shadow's right, Scooty ventured. She pointed toward the outpost. See, there are more highlighters. They're almost touching the rock. But what if Twisp comes back and we aren't... I'll bring us back as soon as the kelp lets us, Scooty said. She fired up the ramjets. No, I'll take breather tanks and go out to... Brett! Scooty put a hand on his arm. You saw what he did to Bushka. But I haven't hurt it, or anyone. That merman would have killed me. We don't know what it'll do, Scooty said.
She's right, Peniel said. What good would you be to your friend without arms?
Brett sank back into the seat. Scooty pushed the throttles ahead and lowered the foils. The boat gathered speed, lifted, and swept down the channel toward the descending highlighters. Brett sat in silence. He felt suddenly that his mermen companions had turned against him, even Scooty. How could they know what the kelp wanted? So it opened a channel through its heavy growth. So it directed a current through that channel. Twisp might need him back there where they were supposed to be waiting. Abruptly, Brett shook his head. He thought how Twisp would react to such protests.
Don't be a fool.
The kelp had spoken without misunderstanding. Bushka, the channel, the current. Words could say no clearer what had to be done now. Scooty and the others had merely understood and accepted it more quickly. With a chopping motion, Scooty cut the power and the foil settled in a heaving surge that sent waves curling outward on both sides. We're blocked, she said. They looked ahead. Not only had kelp closed the channel through which the foil had come, but fronds and stalks lifted out of the water ahead of them. A low, thick forest of green blocked their passage. Brett glanced left. The outpost loomed high there, no more than 3 clicks away. Highlighters continued to descend about a click ahead of them, massed flocks of them. Peniel spoke from directly behind Brett. I don't remember them as being that colorful in the hollows. A new breed, no doubt of it, Kareen said. What do we do now? Brett said. We sit here until we figure out why the kelp directed us to this place, Scooty said. Brett looked up at the descending flocks of highlighters. Dark tentacles reached down toward the water. Sunlight flashed rainbow iridescence off the great bags.
The histories say the kelp makes its own hydrogen the way you islanders do, Peniel said. The bags are extruded deep under water, filled and sent flying to spread the spores. One of my ancestors rode a highlighter.
One of my ancestors rode a highlighter. He spoke in a breathless whisper. They've always fascinated me. I've dreamed of this day. I'm going to repeat that so it's in a breathless whisper. The histories say the kelp makes its own hydrogen the way you islanders do, Peniel said. The bags are extruded deep under water, filled and sent flying to spread the spores. One of my ancestors rode a highlighter. He spoke in a breathless whisper. They've always fascinated me. I've dreamt of this day. I've dreamed of this day. What are they doing? Scooty asked. Why would they bring spores here? There's kelp all around us. You're assuming they're intelligently directed, Kareen said. They're probably going wherever the wind takes them. Peniel shook his head sharply. Nah, who controls the currents controls the temperature of the surface water. Who controls that directs the winds. Then what are they doing? Scooty repeated. They're not drifting very fast anymore. It's as though they were assembling here. The hive tanks? Kareen asked. How could the kelp... Scooty began. She broke off. Then, is this where they're supposed to come down? Near enough, Kareen said. Shadow?
The correct quadrant, he said. He glanced at a chrono. By the original schedule, splashdown's already overdue.
There's a strange highlighter, Brett said. Or is that really an LTA? He pointed upward, his finger almost touching the overhead plaz. Parachute, Peniel said. Ship's guts! There comes the first hype tank. Look at the highlighters, Scooty said. The colorful bags had begun a swirling motion, opening a space in their center. The open space drifted somewhat south and a bit west, presenting a net of sea to catch the descending parachute. Something could be seen dangling from the parachute now, a silvery cylinder that reflected bright flashes from the suns. Ship, that thing is big, Peniel said. I wonder what's in it, Kareen whispered. We're about to discover that, Brett said. Look, above the parachute, there comes another one, and another. Oh, if I could only get my hands on one of them, just one, Peniel said. The first hive tank was now little more than 100 meters above the water. It descended swiftly, the actual splashdown concealed within the ring of highlighters. A second hive tank fell into the open circle, a third, a fourth. The watchers counted 20 of them, some larger than the foil. The circle of highlighters closed in as the last tank hit the water. Immediately, a lane through the kelp began to spread from the foil's blocked position to where the highlighters had collected. We are being asked to join them, Scooty said. She fired up the rams and eased the foil ahead at hull speed, keeping it just off the step. A bow wave spread on both sides. The highlighters parted as the foil drew near them, opening a passage into a kelp-free circle where the great tanks bobbed. The occupants of the foil stared in wonder at the vista opened to them. Highlighter tentacles could be seen working over the closure mechanisms of the tanks, opening them and snaking inside. Wide curved hatches swung aside to the probing tentacles. Abruptly, one of the opened tanks tipped, admitting a surge of water. White-bellied sea mammals emerged and immediately dove into the water. Orcas, Peniel breathed. Look! He pointed across Brett's shoulder. Humpback whales, just the way they looked in the hollows. My whales, Scooty whispered. The channel that had been opened for the foil curved left now, directing them to a cluster of 6 tanks being held side by side in a nest of kelp. Highlighter tentacles could be seen writhing and twisting into the tanks. As the foil neared this cluster, a dark tentacle emerged with a struggling human form, pale-skinned and naked. Another tentacle came up with another human. Another. Another. A spectrum of skin shades came out of the tanks, from darker than Scooty to paler than Kareen Ale. What are they doing with those poor people? Kareen demanded. The faces of the people being taken from the tanks betrayed obvious terror, but the terror began to subside even as the foil's occupants watched. Slowly, highlighters carrying humans began to drift toward the foil. There's why we were brought in, Brett said. Come on, Shadow, let's open the hatch. Scooty silenced the foil's jets. We can't handle that many people, she said. She pointed at the massed highlighters removing other humans from the adjacent tanks. More than 100 human figures could be seen grasped in highlighter tentacles, and more humans were being removed from the tanks every second. That many will sink us, Scooty said. Brett, hesitating in the passageway to follow the direction of Scooty's pointing finger, said, We'll have to tow them to the outpost. We'll see if we can get a line to them. He whirled and dashed down the passage toward the main hatch. Peniel could be heard running behind him. Highlighters already were clustering around the hatchway when Brett opened it. A tentacle snaked in the opening and grasped Brett. He froze. Words filled his mind, clear and perfect, without any secondary sounds to distort them. Gentle human who is loved by Vata's beloved Scudi, do not fear. We bring you ship clones to live in peace beside all of you who share Pandora with a Vata. Brett gasped and sensed Peniel beside him. Muddy thoughts, nowhere near as clear as those bell-like words entering his senses through the highlighter tentacles. Peniel projected awe, schoolboy memories of hollow views displaying highlighters, family stories of that first Pandoran Peniel, then fear that the mass of humans being delivered by the highlighters would sink the foil. Highlighters will buoy you, the tentacles transmitted. Do not fear. What a splendid day this is! What marvelous surprises have come to us, the gift of blessed ship! Slowly Brett regained the use of his own senses. He found himself braced against loops of highlighter tentacles. Naked humans were being slipped through the hatchway one after the other. How tall the newcomers were! Some of them had to duck in the passageway. Peniel looked dazed in a similar tentacle grasp. He waved the newcomers up the passage toward the control cabin. Some of you can go into the cargo bays along this passage, Brett called. They went where Brett and Peniel directed them. No questions, no arguments. They appeared to be in shock from They appeared to be in shock from awakening into the tentacles of highlighters. We're being moved toward the outpost, Peniel said. He nodded toward the edge of black rock visible out the hatchway. The sound of the surf against the base of the outpost was clearly audible. Gallo, Brett said. As Brett spoke, the highlighter tentacles unwound from his body. Peniel, too, was released. The space around them remained crowded with silent newcomers. More could be seen held in highlighter tentacles, other tentacles clutching the lip of the hatchway. Slowly he began squeezing his way forward, apologizing, feeling the pressure of naked skin that made way for him. The pilot cabin was not quite as crowded as the passage. Space had been left around the unconscious form of Bushka on the cot. More space insulated the command seats where Scudi and Kareen sat. A lacework of highlighter tentacles covered most of the plaz, leaving only small framed bits of the forward view. The outpost loomed high there, the surf sound low. Kelp is right up against the outpost now, Kareen said. Look at it. There's almost no open space left. One of the newcomers, a man so tall that his head almost touched the top of the cabin, came forward and bent to peer through a small opening in the lacework of highlighter tentacles. He straightened presently and looked down at the webs between Scudi's toes, then to the similar growth on Kareen's feet. He brought his attention at last to Brett's large eyes. One sec.
God save us, he said. If we breed on this planet, will our offspring all be deformed?
Brett was caught first by the man's accent, an odd lilting in the way he spoke, then by the words. The man looked at mermen and islanders with the same obviously revolted expression. Kareen, shocked, shot a glance at Brett and then at the cabin full of giant humans, the looks of dazed withdrawal slowly vanishing from all of those faces, those strangely similar faces. Kareen wondered how these people could identify each other, except for the variations in skin tone. They all looked so much alike. It dawned on her then that she was seeing ship normals, human normals. She, with her small stature and partly webbed toes, she was the freak. Ship. How would these newcomers take to people like the Chief Justice, or even Queets Twisp with his ungainly arms? What would they say on encountering the CP? The foil grated against rock then. Again. Again. It lifted slightly and was set down hard on a solid surface. We've arrived, Scudi said. And we're going to have to deal with Gallows somehow. Peniel said. If the kelp hasn't already done it for us, Kareen said.
There's no telling what it'll do, Peniel said. I'm afraid Twisp was right. It's not to be trusted.
It can be damned convincing, though, Brett said, recalling the touch of highlighters at the hatchway.
That's its real danger, Peniel said.
Fools, who slaughtered the cattle sacred to the Sun King, behold, the god deprived them of their day of homecoming. Homer, Ship Records. Twisp could hear Gallo's people talking down in the basin, a nervousness in their chatter that told him of the strength of his own position. Gallo had brought him up a narrow trail cut in the rock and out onto a flat promontory that jutted seaward on the southeastern edge of the outpost. A breeze blew against Twisp's face. "One day I will have my administrative building here," he said, gesturing expansively. Twisp glanced around him at the black rock sparkling with mineral fragments in the light of both suns. He had seen many days such as this one, both suns up, the sea rolling easily under a blanket of kelp, but never from such a vantage. Not even the highest point on Vashon commanded such a view, high, solid, and unmoving. Gallo would build here? Twisp tried to catch snatches of the conversation from below them, but mostly it was words of nervousness that permeated this place. Gallo was not immune to it. "The hive tanks will be coming down soon," he said, "and I'll have them." Twisp looked out at all that kelp, remembering Nakano's words. "He needs your help."
"How will you recover the tanks?"
Twisp asked, his tone reasonable.
"How will you recover the tanks?"
There we go. Much more reasonable. Ha ha. Twisp asked, his tone reasonable. He felt no need to mention the ring of kelp around this rocky outcrop lifting from the sea. From this vantage it appeared to Twisp that the kelp was even closer than it had been when he and Nakano had swum away from the foil. "LTAs," Gallo said, pointing at the partly filled bags of 3 LTAs waiting on their pad. The mermen working around the LTAs appeared to be the only purposeful figures in the basin. "It would help, of course, if we had your foil," Gallo said. "I'm prepared to offer a great deal in return for that."
"You have a foil," Twisp said. "I saw it anchored next to the lee side of this place."
He kept his tone casual, thinking how like so many other times this was, bargaining for the best price on his catch. "We both know the kelp won't give passage to our foil," Gallo said, "but if you were to return to your foil with Nakano—" Twisp took a deep breath. Yes, this was like bargaining for his catch, but there was a profound difference. You could respect the fish buyers even while you opposed them. Gallo revolted him. Twisp fought to keep this emotion out of his voice.
"I don't know that you have anything to offer me," he said.
"Power! A share in the new Pandora!"
"Is that all?"
"All?" Gallo appeared truly surprised.
"Seems to me the new Pandora's gonna happen anyway. I don't see where you're gonna have much influence in it, the kelp wanting your hide and all."
"You don't understand," Gallo said. "Merman Mercantile controls most of the food sources, the processing. Kareen Ale can be bent to our needs, and her shares will—"
"You don't have Kareen Ale."
"With your foil, and the people in it—"
"From what I could see, Shadow Peniel has Kareen Ale, and as far as Scooty Wang is concerned, she's a child who— I think maybe she's a very wealthy child."
"Exactly. Your foil and the people in it are the key."
"But you don't have that key. I have it."
"And I have you," Gallo said, his voice hard.
"And the kelp has Chairman Keel,"
Twisp said. But it does not have me, and I still have the means of recovering the hive tanks. The LTAs will be clumsier and slower, but they can do it.
You're offering me a subordinate position in your own organization, Twisp said. What's to prevent me from grabbing it all What's to prevent me from grabbing it all once I'm back on the foil? Nakano.
Twisp chewed his lip to keep from laughing. Gallo had very little buying power. Not at all, really, with the kelp against him and the foil in the hands of someone who wanted to beat him to the tanks. Twisp looked up at the sky. The tanks would be coming down within sight of this place, Gallo said. His people at the launch base had alerted Gallo. And that was another consideration. Gallo had followers in many places, islanders as well. But the hive tanks. Twisp could not prevent a deep sense of excitement at the thought of them. He had grown up on stories speculating about the tank's contents. They were a bag of prizes meant to humanize Pandora. Could the kelp prevent that? Twisp turned and looked at the LTAs. No doubt those things could move above the kelp's reach. But would the kelp let airborne humans pluck the prize from the sea? It all depended on where the tanks came down. There was a kelp-free sea surface visible from this high point. A very uncertain lottery, that. A very uncertain lottery, though. Gallo moved up beside Twisp to share his view of the outpost's interior basin and its waiting LTAs. "There's my fallback position," Gallo said. He nodded toward the LTAs. Twisp knew what he would do now if this were bargaining for his catch. Threaten to go to another buyer. Get caustic and let this buyer know he had no status in the larger game.
"I think you're nothing but eel shit," Twisp said. "Concentrate on the facts. If the tanks land in kelp, you're finished. Without hostages, you're just a pitiful handful of people on one little bit of land. You may have followers elsewhere, but I'm betting they'll desert you the second they recognize how powerless you really are."
"I still have you," Gallo grated. "And don't make any mistakes about what I can do to you."
"What can you do?"
Twisp asked, his voice at its most reasonable.
"We're alone up here. All I have to do is grab you and dive off this place into the sea. The kelp'll get us both."
Gallo smiled and slipped a laser gun from the pouch pocket at his waist.
"I thought you'd have one of those," Twisp said.
"I would take great pleasure in cutting you into pieces slowly," Gallo said.
"Except that you need me," Twisp said. "You're no gambler, Gallo. You like sure things."
Gallo scowled. Twisp inclined his head toward the LTAs. The bags were beginning to swell. Someone was pumping hydrogen into them.
"Those are not a sure thing," Twisp said.
Gallo forced his features into a semblance of a smile. He looked down at the weapon in his hand.
"Why are we arguing?" "Is that what we're doing?"
Twisp asked.
"You are stalling,"
Gallo said. "You want to see where the tanks come down." Twisp smiled. "For an islander, you're pretty smart," Gallo said. "You know what I'm offering. You could have anything you want. Money, women."
"How do you know what I want?"
Twisp asked. "You're no different from anyone else in that," Gallo said. He sent his glance along Twisp's long arms. "There might even be a few merman women who wouldn't find you objectionable." Gallo pocketed his laser gun and displayed his empty hand. "See? I know what'll work with you. I know what I can give you." Twisp shook his head slowly from side to side. Again he looked at the LTAs. Objectionable? One step and he would have his long arms on the most objectionable human he had ever met. Two more steps and they would be over the side into the sea.
But then I might never know how it came out.
He thought about finding himself conscious in the kelp's vast reservoir of awareness. He shared Keel's revulsion to that end. Damn, and I couldn't help the old man. Gallo owes us for that. A shadow passed across Twisp, bringing an immediate coolness from the breeze that tugged at him. He thought it was just another cloud, but Gallo gasped and something touched Twisp's shoulder, his cheek, a long and ropey something. Twisp looked up into the base of a highlighter then, seeing the long dark tentacles all around, feeling them grab him. Somewhere he could hear screaming. Gallo? A flawless voice filled Twisp's senses, seeming to come at him along every nerve channel. Hearing, touch, sight, all of him was caught up in that voice. "Welcome to Vata, fisherman Twisp," the voice said. "What is your wish?" "Put me down," Twisp said. "Ah, you wish to retain the flesh. Then Vata cannot put you down here. The flesh would be damaged, very likely destroyed. Be patient and have no fear. Vata will put you down with your friends." "Gallo?" Twisp managed. "He is not your friend." "I know that." "And so does Vata. Gallo will be put down, as you so quaintly phrase it, but from a great height. Gallo is no longer anything but a curiosity, no more than an aberration. Better to consider him a disease, infectious and sometimes deadly. Vata is curing the infected body." Twisp grew aware then that he dangled high in the air, wind blowing past him. A great expanse of kelp spread out far below him. A sudden feeling of vertigo tightened his chest and throat, filled him with dizziness. "Do not fear," the flawless voice said. "Vata cherishes the friends and companions of beloved Scooty Wang." Twisp slowly twisted his head upward, feeling the ropey tentacles holding him tight around the waist and legs, seeing the dark underside of the bag that suspended this twining mass. "Vata?" "You see what you call highlighter," the voice told him. "Once more Vata spawns in the mother sea. Once more there is rock. That which humans destroyed, humans have restored. Thereby you learn from your mistakes." A great feeling of bitterness welled up in Twisp. "So you're going to fix everything. No more mistakes. Everything perfect in the most perfect of worlds." A sense of laughter without sound permeated Twisp then. The flawless voice came light and cajoling. "Do not project your fears upon Vata. Here is only the mirror that reveals yourself." The voice changed, becoming almost strident. "Now, here below you have your friends. Treat them well and share your joys with them. Have not islanders learned this lesson well from the human errors of the past?" If war does come, the best thing to do will be to just stay alive and thus add to the numbers of sane people. George Orwell, Ship Records. A man after my own heart. The forward bulk of Vashon was close enough in the darkness that Brett could pick out the lights of the more prominent structures. He sat beside Scooty in the control seats of the foil, hearing the low-voiced conversations behind him. Most of the ship clones had been deposited on the outpost amidst the fearful and chastened green dashers. The task of feeding all those newcomers had become a primary problem. Only a representative few of the people from the hive tanks remained on the foil. In the foil. The clone called Bickle stood close behind Brett, watching the same night view of their approach to Vashon. That Bickle would be one to watch, Brett thought. A demanding, powerful man. And large. All of these ship clones were big. This amplified the food problem in a daunting way. Someone came up from the rear of the cabin and stopped near the big ship clone. "There will be a lot of debriefing once we get there." The voice was Kareen Ale's. Brett heard Twisp cough at the rear of the cabin. Debriefing? Probably. Some of the old routines still had value. Twisp's experience in the grip of the highlighter must be added to all the other new knowledge. Beloved Scooty Wang. Brett glanced at Scooty's profile outlined in the dim lights from the instruments ahead of her. Something filled his breast at the very thought of Scooty. Beloved, beloved, he thought. The twin lane of blue lights that marked Vashon's main harbor entrance loomed dead ahead. Scooty dropped the foil down onto its hull. They'll have medical people waiting for Bushka, Scooty said. Better get him back to the hatch. Right. Ale could be heard leaving.
Is that land just beyond the island? Bickle asked.
Brett shuddered. The newcomers always sounded so loud. It's land, Scooty said. It must be at least 200 meters high, Brett said. He had to remind himself that neither this newcomer nor Scooty could see the landmass as clearly as he could. The foil was into the enclosing arms of Vashon's harbor, then. Brett popped the cabin emergency hatch beside him and leaned out into the wind, seeing the familiar outline of this haven he had known so intimately. That other time of intimacy with this place seemed to him now eons in the past. His position in the foil's control cabin gave him a commanding view of the approach. The rim lights, islanders racing to grab the foil's lines as Scooty backed the jets. The hissing of the jets went silent. The foil rocked and then was snugged against the bubbly at the dockside. Scooty turned on the cabin lights. Familiar faces looked up at Brett, islander faces he had noticed in passing many times. And with them came the old familiar stench of Vashon.
Ugh, Bickle said. This place stinks.
Brett felt Scooty's arm go around his neck, and her head bent close to his. I don't mind the smell, love, she whispered. We'll clean it up when we get on land, Brett said. He looked up at the great mass of star-lighted rock that dominated the sky behind Vashon. Was that where he and Scooty would go? Or would they return down under and work to reclaim other places like this one? A voice called up to them from dockside.
That you, Brett Norton?
Here I am.
Your folks are waiting at the Hall of Art. Say they're anxious to see you.
Would you tell them we'll meet them at the Ace of Cups? Brett called. I've got some friends I want them to meet.
Jesus Christ!
Bickle's voice was a sharp exhalation behind Brett.
Look at the deformities. How the hell can those people live?
Happily, Brett said. Get used to it, ship clone. To us, they're beautiful. Gently, he pressed back against Scooty, indicating that he wanted to get out of the control seats. Together, they slid out of the seats and looked up at the towering figure of Bickle.
What did you call me?
Bickle demanded. Ship clone, Brett said. Every living human being ship brought to Pandora was a clone.
Yeah.
Bickle rubbed at his chin and glanced out at the throng on dockside. The newcomers emerging there towered over the islanders.
Jesus help us, Bickle whispered. When we created Ship, we never suspected.
He shook his head. I would be careful of who you tell your story of Ship's origin, Brett cautioned. Certain worshippers might not like it.
Like it or lump it, Bickle growled. Ship was created by men like me. Our goal was a mechanical consciousness.
And when you achieved this consciousness, Scooty said, it
took over, Bickle said. It said it was our god, and we were to determine how we would worship it.
How strange, Scooty murmured.
You better believe it, Bickle said. Does anyone here have any idea how long we were in hibernation?
What difference does it make? Brett asked. You're alive here and now, and that's what you'll have to deal with.
Hey, kid,
It was Twisp calling from the passageway. Come on! I've been waiting for you dockside. Lots of things happening. We got merman patrols underwater all around that landmass, burning dashers. Dashers want back on the land, too. We're coming. Brett took Scooty's hand and headed toward the passage. Vata and Duque are gone, Twisp said. Someone broke open the Vata pool and they're just gone. Brett hesitated, feeling the sweat start in his hand against Scooty. Gallo? No, Gallo was dead. Then some of Gallo's people? He quickened his pace. A raucous sound came from the dockside, echoing up the passage. What was that? Scooty asked. Haven't you ever heard a rooster crow? Bickle demanded from close behind them. A highlighter brought 'em, Twisp called ahead of them. Chickens, they're called. There's something like a squawk. In the world you shall have tribulation, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world. The Christian Book of the Dead. Vata lolled on a buoyant bed of kelp fronds, her head held high to give her a view across Duque, nestled sleeping in the curve of her great left arm. The dawnlight of little sun cast a sharp horizontal illumination across the scene. The sea lifted and fell in gentle waves, their crests damped by the giant leaves. When either of them hungered, minuscule cilia from the kelp wormed into a vein and nutrients flowed. Kelp to Vata, the kelp to Duque. And back from Vata flowed the genetic information stored in its purest form within her cells. Vata to Avata. What a wonderful awakening, Vata thought. Probing kelp tendrils had crept through the walls of her pool in the depths of Vashon, admitting a great wash of sea water that swept away the watchers and the chaplain psychiatrist. The swiftly darting tendrils had encased Duque and herself, pulling them out into the sea and up to the nighttime surface. There, a swift current had hurried them away from Vashon's injured bulk. At some distance from the island, highlighter tendrils had plucked the two of them from the sea and brought them to this place where only the sea prevailed. In the grasp of the highlighter tendrils, Vata had found her true awakening. How marvelous! All of the stored human lives, the voices, what a wonderful thing! Strange that some of the voices objected to their preservation in the kelp. She had heard the exchange between Avata and the one called Keel. "You're editing me!" That was what Keel had said. "My voice had flaws, and I could always hear them. They were part of me." "You live in Avata now. How all-encompassing, how calming that beautiful voice.
You've given me an unflawed voice. Stop it!"
And true enough, when next she heard Keel's voice, it had a different tone, something of a hoarseness in it, throat clearings and coughs.
"You think you speak the language of my people," Keel accused. "What nonsense!"
Avata speaks all languages. That was telling him, Vata thought. But Duque, sharing her awareness of this internalized conversation, had grinned agreement with Keel.
"Every planet has its own language," Keel said. "It has its own secret ways of communication."
Do you not understand Avata?
"Oh, you have the words down well enough, and you know the language of actions, but you've not penetrated my heart, or you wouldn't have tried to edit me and improve me."
Then what would you have of Avata?
"Keep your hands off me!"
You do not wish to be preserved?
"Oh, I have enough curiosity to accept that. You've showed us your Lazarus trick, and I'm thankful I no longer have that old body's pains."
Is that not an improvement, then?
You can't improve me. I can only improve myself. You and Ship can stuff your miracles. That's one of the real secrets of my language.
A bit uncouth, but understandable.
That language was born on the planet where Lazarus lived and died and lived. My kind first learned to speak there. The original Lazarus knew my meaning. By all the gods, he knew.
When Vata awakened Duque and expressed her puzzlement to him, Duque laughed. You see, he shouted, we care who forces our dreams onto us. We care who forces our dreams onto us. And that was The Lazarus Effect by Bill Ransom and Frank Herbert. It is the second book of the Pandora sequence, third book if you include Destination Void. For whatever reason, that one is typically excluded from its number, and I'm not totally sure why, considering they keep bringing it up all the time. Whenever I see the Pandora sequence, it's just the Jesus incident, the Lazarus Effect, and the Ascension Factor. Even though, strictly speaking, you don't need Destination Void. The books tell you everything you need to know about the practical upshots there. But I felt it was important to read it aloud. Plus, I think somebody had asked for it anyway. Or did they ask for... I think they asked for the Jesus incident. So I did Destination Void as kind of a primer. They're all... One thing you'll notice is the books are all pretty wildly different from each other. The third book is... The next book, The Ascension Factor, is going to feel kind of like a synthesis of a bunch of them in different ways. You'll know what I mean when we get there. Which won't be for a while, because we've got to read Death's End by Cixin Liu next on Fridays. And that's going to take a while, because that's a fairly long book. So yeah, tentatively, that is next week's plan, is we get started right on that, and keep moving that along. We still have a bunch of Down Below Station to do, and we might get done what's left of Full Metal Panic next week, but I kind of doubt it. Tentatively 2 more streams of the first collection of the Full Metal Panic books. Tentatively 2. And then I don't know what I'll do. I'll figure something out. I don't know that I'll go straight to the next one. I might do some... somebody had indicated interest in me reading aloud some of the Warhammer 40k stuff. I'd be willing to give the Caiaphas Cain stuff a shot. I haven't read those in a while, though, so it's been a minute. Anyway, that about does it. I really do like this book. It's a pretty entertaining one. It's got some interesting ideas. I do generally love the kelp in this, because it's kind of got its own character. And that was sort of clear in the Jesus incident, and it's fairly clear now that it's got its own character, that it grows and it changes over time. We're going to see more of that in the third book, or in the next book, along in the Ascension Factor. I can't say much more. I can't really say things about the Ascension Factor without major early books early book spoilers. So I don't want to do that. No, I'm glad you liked it, Fritz on Tap. I think it's a fun one. Lots of interesting characters, a lot of interesting ideas. I like some of its examinations on power and the people who want it. Even though Gelar Gallo is he's kind of a caricature in that regard. He's kind of hammy. I hammed him up a bit more than he is, but he's like, even then, like, the things he's saying are just like ridiculously mustache twirling. He's like so obviously our villain. It's unreal. He's a racist asshole that nobody likes.
Um, his people are with him because they fear him or think he can bring them something when they aren't, fanatics of some kind. Um, so it's like nobody actually likes the dude, and he's like, well, I'm gonna get mine, and he doesn't care. He's a sociopath and willing to use and abuse people as he sees fit to get his power. So he's a character. I kind of wish we had more exploration of him as a character. We're not going to get it. We're not. Book's over. He doesn't live into the next one. We get someone else who we will do a bit more of an examination on the nature of power with. That's all I can say about that. But yeah, with so next week we'll be starting Death's End, and if you remember it, so Death as a warning preface, Death's End has pacing issues. Um, Part of the reason for these pacing issues is because it was originally going to be 2 books, and Cixin Liu had it was either a health scare or a publisher scare, and basically had to make it into one, and was like, "Oh, I'm going to get this all into one, so it's all done." Um, with like more room in his head for doing more stuff after that. Um, so it winds up having interesting pacing issues. So it winds up being a bit faster paced than um, the Dark Forest. The Dark Forest has like the entire first third to half is like, okay, we've got Luo Ji here, and he's doing his thing, and I guess we're getting sort of that documentarian history lesson vibe, but at the same time, it's like, what are we doing? Where are we going? What is all this? Why does this matter? Um, we're going to have some of that in Death's End, but we're going to have other things going on too, some of which are more interesting. It's going to feel like you're reading a bunch of lengthy, shorter stories that kind of get stapled together in some ways. You'll see what I mean when we get there. Mostly, we have an opener in that book that makes no sense at all for hundreds of pages. It means nothing for a long time. And then it's like, oh, I get it. Okay, fine. And then becomes plot relevant. But the opener is like a, what are we doing here? What on earth does this have to do with the price of eggs? Or world peace? What does this have to do with anything? And then we go on to other characters and other situations, and some of whom are going to do some pretty questionable things. If you thought we had kind of goofy characters that you sort of want to strangle in the previous 2 books, boy howdy, are we going to get more. And they're going to be pretty protagonist adjacent. So it's going to be fun. Um, I have not figured out what voices I'm going to do for characters. I'm going to have to work on that. We'll wing it if need be. But yeah, it's a pretty hefty volume. I do believe though that in the final analysis, it is worth it. We go places with Death's End. We go places. We get some interesting ideas pumped forth, um, which are pretty fantastic. Uh, we have to wait a while for them, but we got some interesting stuff headed our way. The scale gets pretty daffy. The scale gets wild. Um, Reminds me fondly of Lensman in some regards. I think that's accidental because I find it unlikely that he would have read it, but it's not impossible. Um, I would bet money though that the person who did the fan fiction 4th volume probably did, because there's or read some Green Lantern, because there's definitely some conceptual overlap there. We'll see. Anyway, that's fun stuff. Oh! I guess I'm doing this soundtrack thing, or I'm doing album recommendations. What album will I recommend this week? What album? What album will I recommend? Let's go into my music folder here and find something that's semi-random. You know what? Trying to think of one that's appropriate, and it's very difficult. I'm not going to think of one that's appropriate. I'm just going to go with my gut and pick something at not quite random. I'm going to go with "Sleep Dirt" by Frank Zappa from 1979. Frank Zappa, "Sleep Dirt." I think it's "Sleep Dirt" is the one I'm thinking of. Let me double check. This is the one with Spider of Destiny, right? And Filthy Habits, yes. Yep. Sleep Dirt. That's the one. Um, it's an interesting album. I rather like it. I put it kind of in a similar vein to the Grand Wazoo. If anybody's listened to the Grand Wazoo, the Grand Wazoo is probably almost hands down my favorite Zappa album. It's very good. Um, big fan. Big fan. Also, honorable mentions to Zootalours and Apostrophe for being on the list. They're good times. Um, Classics. They're classics, is what they are. They're classics. Um, what's the other one that's a bit later? I mean, I like Joe's Garage. I like the story Joe's Garage has to tell. Big shout out to just the singular track, Watermelon in Easter Hay. Oh, I cannot listen to that song without getting like very mushy. I tear up. It's like I'm watching the end to Forrest Gump all over again. I turn into an ugly crying man baby. It's bad. It's great. It's a great song. Great track. Partly due to the context in the album it's in, and partly due to it's just gorgeous to listen to. Um, and the context of the story that it's a part of. Anyway, that will do it for me. The cover image, incidentally, is the back flap of this one, I think. Yes, it's the back flap of that one. So on the back flap of that, the back cover portion of that is the it's some birds. Geez, now I can't remember which one that was. Is it this one? Yeah, it's that one. Some birds flying with a sun in the background, gorgeously rendered. I felt that was appropriate. Big shout out to the person who keeps taking photos of Jeff Vandermeer area X novels that have been like waterlogged and like in a swamp or a ditch somewhere, because those make for great bookends. Bookend cover art for these streams. Big shout out to them. If it's Jeff Vandermeer himself, thank you, dude. It really helps. They're great. They're great. Anyway, that'll do it for me for this week. Hopefully people enjoyed. I know I had fun. And that's why I do these. I wouldn't do them if I didn't. If other people are enjoying them, that's awesome. Otherwise, it's me having fun. I guess theoretically enjoying the sound of my voice, but I kind of cringe every time I listen to these. The sound of my voice on recording kind of upsets me for reasons I can't easily articulate. Maybe if I had better recording gear, it wouldn't be the case, but I doubt it. Anyway, that'll do it. Stay safe, stay sane, so that the best thing you can do. What is that line by Orwell? What was that line? What was that line? What was that line? If war does come, the best thing to do will be to just stay alive and thus add to the numbers of sane people. So stay sane so you can add to the numbers of sane people, and be decent to each other so you can prove you're sane. That'll do it for me. See you all later. Have a good weekend. I guess it's Good Friday, so if the Judeo-Christian influenced among you, have a Good Friday. And I guess Easter Sunday, therefore, is coming up this weekend. So have fun with your capitalist hijacked religious holiday or something. That's too cynical and snarky, Frag. You should be nicer about this whole thing. I like chocolate. Chocolate's good. Chocolate is tasty. It doesn't have to be covered in pastel colors. Anyway. Yep, that'll do it for me. Toodaloo! Good. You should love Zappa. Whether he would have loved any of us is oh god, I think about that sometimes. I'm like, man, if Zappa was around with current events in current era, would would he be rolling and turning in his grave? Or would he just be like, I gotta keep doing what I'm doing because it's the only way I can be? Ah, man. Ah. Anyway, I'll see you all later. Have a great time this weekend.